Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to From Dust to Prosperity, Soil's role in shaping Africa's future. My name is Leigh Winowiecki, and I am a global storyteller and communication specialist, and I'm honored to be your moderator today for this very timely conversation about something we all depend on, but often overlook, which is soil. Soil is the foundation of life. It feeds us, it filters our water, supports biodiversity, and regulates our climate. Yet across Africa and the globe, our soils are under threat. Degradation is robbing communities of their livelihoods, weakening food systems, and accelerating the climate crisis. Today's webinar is part of the Allure of Soil Campaign, a movement that invites us to see soil not just as dirt under our feet, but as a living, breathing ecosystem that holds the key to our shared prosperity. Our goal today is simple, but critical: to explore why soil is everyone's business, to understand how healthy soil underpins food security, climate resilience, and economic development, and most importantly, to inspire action, because every one of us has a role to play in regenerating the earth beneath our feet. To help us unpack these ideas, we are joined by a brilliant and diverse panel of experts. We have Marete Selvin, who's the co-founder of Meraki Africa and the force behind the Allure of Soil Campaign. We have Chaney St. the International Technical Specialist in Water and Soil Management at the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. We have Dr. Leigh Winowiecki, Soil and Land Health Global Research Lead at CIFOR-ICRAF and co-lead of the Coalition of Action for Soil Health, CASH. We have Haroon Wurui, Lead for Agroecology and Food Rights at the Heinrich Böll Stiftung. And we should have Ivy Gloria Atiano, representing Young Professionals for Agricultural Development Kenya and the Youth for Soil movement. I can't see if she's joined yet, and then last but certainly not least, we have Grace Bwenji, Senior Planner for Agriculture at Uganda's National Planning Authority. Together, this panel brings deep expertise from across the fields of science, policy, youth activism, and community development. We will hear their insights on the hidden power of soil and what it will take to safeguard this precious resource for generations to come. Now, welcome to everyone who has joined while I was speaking. As I said earlier, my name is Ghali Eid, and I am the moderator for this webinar, From Dust to Prosperity, Soil's Role in Shaping Africa's Future. I will move to introduce Marete Selvin, who is the co-founder of Meraki Africa and really the driving force behind the Allure of Soil Campaign. This movement aims to transform how we view soil from something we walk onto to a vital resource we must protect. Marete, if you could unmute and please tell us more about the campaign and how people can get involved.
All right, thank you so much, Kali, for the introduction. So my name is Marete Selvin. I am a documentary filmmaker and the co-founder of Meraki Africa. So Meraki Africa is a communication and production company that seeks to leverage the power of storytelling to drive positive social change. And through the Allure of Soil, we are on a mission to illuminate the silent hero that feeds, fuels, and shelters us, because we viewing soil this as not just an environmental tale, it's a story about us. So why does it matter? We think of it as the heartbeat of life. It's the keeper of nutrients, the guardian of water, and the stage upon which every leaf falls and every seed sprouts. So it's really not just about our food. It's beyond the production of food. The health of the planet and our health really depends on how healthy our soils are. So what are our objectives? we are looking at raising awareness and appreciation. It's moving the conversation from the farmers, the scientists, the conservationists, and the people who work with soil every single day. So we're looking at raising awareness and appreciation, making soil relatable, fascinating, and even funny. We aim to create a widespread awareness of its critical role in life beyond just growing food. And beyond that, we're saying that knowing is half the battle. So we've known about it. We've known how important it is. We've known how critical it is and why it's necessary for each and every one of us to take care of it. We want to move to the next level through the campaign, which is we want to inspire real action, whether it's planting a garden, it's supporting sustainable farming, or influencing policies that protect our soil, because we believe that small changes can make big differences. Our skill and our strength is in storytelling. So our campaign is about rekindling our bond with soil through stories, experiences, and action. And how are we going to do this? We're going to do soil stories. This is real life narratives, meet science, reminding us of how deeply connected we are to this vital resource. We're going to do more webinars like these and X spaces where we are simplifying soil science through interactive and engaging sessions. Next, we will have farm tours where we have hands-on experiences that brings the power of restoration to life, because something happens to us when we get to see, when we get to smell and even touch and feel the textures of healthy soils, unhealthy soil. Something happens to our brain and probably we'd want to do something about it. And lastly, we will do garden parties. This is where we say elegance meets the earth, where we're seeking to sparkle curiosity and change in an elegant yet meaningful way. And you may be here and you're wondering, so as an individual, as an organization, how can we team up or rather collaborate to make a difference? And this is how you can partner with us to create impactful and unforgettable experiences like this one today. We are collaborating with the coalition to have this webinar and have many more other collaborations. If you're an NGO, a foundation, and a learning institution, let's collaborate on programmatic initiatives that bring soil to the forefront and inspire action. And beyond partnerships, talk about soil, share our mission, help us stand the tide, because here is the truth. We protect what we cherish what we know, and we know only what we take time to learn. So this is a call to learn together, then we act together and ensure that this story, our story of soil, continues to thrive.
Okay, that is really interesting. I feel like before Marita had reached out for me to join this webinar, I didn't know much about soil, and I feel like the past couple of weeks has been a very steep learning curve in how it's so much deeper than I could have ever imagined. And so even in the chat, I'm seeing people from all over the world. We have Spain to Malawi to Indonesia and Ethiopia and Ghana and Kenya and India, and it's very colorful, very diverse, and it really shows the connection of the world, but also how soil itself connects us. So thank you so much, Marete, for telling us about the campaign. And for everyone listening, you can show your support and spread the message by using the hashtag #WeAreSoil on social media and tagging the campaign. And together we can elevate soil from an afterthought to a global priority. Now, before we dive into the panel discussion, I want to turn to our panelists. I'd love for each of our speakers to briefly just introduce themselves and answer this simple but powerful question. In one sentence, what does soil mean to you? Chaney, we can start with you.
Hi, hi, good day, everybody, and thank you so much for the invite. I must say that these are one of the forums that I feel just right at home because it has both the technical and more than that to it. I am Chaney St. I am an international technical specialist. I lead a lot of IICA's work in climate change and also soil. We are definitely passionate about soils, and as it relates to your question, what I could tell you is that for me, soil really means culture. It's really a 360-degree value of culture, a culture from which we learn the way we live, the way we have space individually and collectively to move forward, the way we sustain ourselves, and the way that we partner and connect to each other. So that's what soil means to me. Thank you very much. Over.
Okay, Leigh, how about yourself? In one sentence, what does soil mean to you?
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Leigh Winowiecki, soil scientist at CIFOR-ICRAF based here in Nairobi, Kenya. For me, it's very simple. Soil is life.
Haroon has joined as well. Haroon, welcome.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm Haroon from the Heinrich Ball Foundation, Nairobi, where I lead agroecology and the right to food. For me, soil is a foundation for our life. It's a foundation that we depend on.
Okay. All right then. And Grace, please.
The last two speakers have my answer, but to me, soil is socio-economic transformation, which actually leads to life. Everything that we were on, everything that we do actually depends on soil. So our well-being, our socio-economic transformation depends on soil.
All right. I love all of those answers. They're very important reminders. So let's now open up to the panel discussion. And I'll start with a few directed questions to each of the panelists, and later we'll open up for broader reflections as well as opening it up for a Q&A. So for the participants as well that are listening in, if you have any questions throughout this, please put them into the chat, and we'll try to get to some of them when we get to that portion of the webinar. So first, Chaney, soil is often called the planet's pantry and lungs. How does it underpin food security and climate regulation and carbon sequestration?
Oh, yeah, thank you for that. And I wanted to start perhaps in that question by just identifying three quick facts. And I think that is important, and that will show you the link. One of the first things that we know for sure is that still now, about more than 95% of our food is actually produced. The global food production depends on that medium that we are speaking about today, the soil. That's number one. And so there's a direct relationship. If we have 95% of our global food production from that, and we are looking at things like almost more than 33% of our soils being degraded, then we should be worried in terms of our food production, not just the productivity and the quality, but also how it translates into other socioeconomic challenges. So that's one of the first things in terms of that. The second quick fact is that if we're looking at soil, soil is also, from the point of the climate and climate regulation, you also have soils being the largest terrestrial sink. And it is not just the medium, it's the interface with the trees as well, and they're storing down the soil, sending it to the roots and then to the soil. So we have soil actually having that. And so therefore, immediately you see the possibility of reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well, which is one of the driving factors of climate change. So that's number two, fact number two. The third fact for me that is very important is that soil in itself, like I said, this culture, this all value soils, this life, it also acts as almost a thermostat of the earth because of its influence on things like the water cycle, also the nutrient cycle, the temperature as well. So all of these three, and these are just three succinct facts, that you could see that these essentially spell the base of the inputs for food production and life itself. And so definitely if soil is able to do that, or if it is negatively affected by that, then we have a serious problem with the issue of food security. We have an issue of climate, an issue with climate, if we do not address these direct links. And these are just the direct links. There are obviously some other indirect links that are there as well. So I think that these are at least some 3 main facts that I would like us to remember. I am very appreciative of this because it's a storytelling. I'm not going to go into the technical gamut, but if we remember these 3 basic facts in terms of the production, how much the relation between soils and the production, the relationship between soils and the climate, the relationship between the soils in terms of a possible solution for this, I think that we could continue the conversation and more so continue the action. Over. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So I then want to ask Leigh, soil degradation is not just an environmental issue, the way that we just heard. How does it, it's also an economic one. So what are the socio-economic impacts you've seen in communities around the world, and in particular in African communities?
Wow, thanks, Kelly. Tough questions for sure. Thanks so much. So first, I liked your introduction where you said kind of before this webinar, you weren't really aware of all the wonderful aspects of soil. So I just wanted to first remind everyone what soil is. So we didn't ask it in the Menti, but I want us to think about soil as the biologically active layer of the Earth's surface. So we depend on soil for so much. And what's happening now is we have over 40% of the Earth's surface degraded, and there's estimates that 65% of the agricultural soils in Africa are degraded. That's over half of the agricultural soils being degraded on this continent. And this means that business as usual is no longer an option. We really need to come together as a community to build healthy soil and to implement healthy soil solutions. There's an estimate that 3.2 billion people a year are negatively affected by soil degradation. And so this means it's an important issue for us as individuals, for us as families, communities, nations, and the global community. So what I'd like to leave the message here today is that I really would like us to broaden the scope of how we think about soil. We've been working really hard to broaden the scope from just thinking about soil as something, a medium that supplies nutrients for plants. We even don't use the word soil fertility as much. We prefer the word soil health. And that's because healthy soil is key to so many of the ecosystem services. Of course, food security, but also nutritious food, climate change adaptation and mitigation. As Chaney said, soil is the 3rd largest carbon sink. 3rd largest carbon sink. It can be a climate solution. Also in Africa, I see we have many people here from Africa. I'm based in Kenya. We have the AFAR 100. It's a commitment to restore 100 million hectares of land in Africa. How are we going to do that? By starting from the soil up. So I think it's really important that we broaden the scope of how we think about soil and connect it with nutrition, connect it with human well-being, connect it with prosperity. And last definition I'll give you. What is healthy soil? It's the ability of soil to sustain productivity, yes, but also the biodiversity, the environmental services, all these critical services, because it's intimately linked with human well-being. Thanks, Kali, for the question.
So next I'll ask Haroon a question. Soil connects with more than agriculture. It affects health, climate, and urban development. How do you see these intersections playing out in the work that you do day to day?
That connectivity, actually, like we said earlier, and I mentioned that soil being the foundation for life, is that integral part of our system that we cannot live without. Soil creates a buffer between us, the aquifers we see underground, the kind of food we get, what we have heard about carbon sequestration, providing the basis for climate change adaptation, This is the basis against which we create the interplay between the rural and the urban. Why do I say so? Without healthy soil, our nutritional needs cannot be met within our urban areas. Urban areas, we are more of consumers of the food that comes from the soil. So being the outermost layer of this globe, we find that soil provides the kind of, or help us to meet our nutritional needs, may it be indeed the rural and the urban. But we'll all appreciate that the migration of the human population from the rural to urban areas is an increase. And we cannot take this for granted that we need to feed this population that is ever growing. We need to enhance the resilience of the urban systems. How do we do that? What from the Henry Foundation we are advocating for is healthy, nutritious food. Food that does not have high levels of pesticides, residues, food that is grown sustainably so that over a long period of time, we are assured of our food. Do we ever think, as in the urban areas, that if our soils break, we will not have food? If our soils break, we know the effect of climate change in terms of the carbon sequestration role that it plays to mitigate the impacts of climate change. Do we really think what will happen if our soils are degraded? Like what Leigh has said, the kind of levels of degradation that we are thinking about globally, Africa, East Africa, and Kenya. So to conclude, my point is that soil plays a very big interlink between the urban and, of course, the food production system. It forms a basis against which we in urban areas survive. And also the interplay between the global perspective of climate change. It becomes a point of climate change mitigation and a point of adaptation. So we cannot do without healthy soils. And just to finish, and also to anchor what Leigh has said, in terms of soil health, we are talking about the biome, the biological nature of our soils. We have for long been thinking about what we are going to add the macros from the synthetic fertilizer, the NPK. We want to go beyond so that we can enhance the stability of the soil biology so that it can continue nurturing us with the food we need, both for our crops. Remember, the nutrients that crops mine from the soil translates to the quality of the food in terms of the nutritional value of the food that we get from our farming practices. Thank you.
Grace, I want to ask you about governments and businesses and the role that they play just before we jump into the youth. What sort of policies and partnerships can safeguard soil for generations to come?
Well, thank you very much for your question. To show how soil is important, and one of the first policy level is actually the Bible. In Genesis, I think chapter 1, you're going to see where God created soil on the third day. That's when God separated water from the land, because he was preparing soil for mankind to exploit. Now, there are three, like for Africa, when you look at how soil drives Africa's development, like specifically for Africa, we do have growth opportunities, and there are not so many. To me, there are four. The first growth opportunity is agriculture, is the first growth opportunity. The other growth opportunity is tourism. The other growth opportunity is minerals and gas, and the other growth opportunity is the human capital development that we have. And these depend on the soil, because agriculture, the crops that we grow, the animals that we rear, all depend on the soil. Under tourism, the animals that we look at, the landforms, the vegetation, all depend on soil. Human capital development. Health is very critical. Health is very critical. And for you to have a healthy population, means you have a healthy diet. If you look at the micronutrient deficiencies that are in the population, right now as I speak, 1/3 of the world is suffering from micronutrient deficiencies. That is zinc, iron, and vitamin A. That micronutrient deficiency means that the crops are not attracting the right micronutrients from the soil now. So the policies that you must put in place are policies that strengthen collaboration, policies that strengthen investment within agriculture, tourism development, and also human capital development. So making sure that, for example, we must put policies in place that are managing the climate. So the national determined contributions within countries, the frameworks that have been put in place should be functional, should be funded. So we need to put the right frameworks, especially compliance measures. How do we make sure that you comply, for example, to using the soil sustainably? Because it is a natural resource, it is a resource. We are not going to overexploit the soil. So you must put policies that make sure that the soil health is maintained, and also making sure that the stakeholders that use the soil are very compliant. And then also we must strengthen our financing mechanism. There should be a financing mechanism to make sure that the soil is very functional, making sure that we have the sustainable land use management practices, making sure that you have the right financing framework in place, managing climate change, very key, and also making sure that institutions are coordinated, making sure that institutions are working together. They must collaborate around this. Soil is touched on by very many. The youth need the soil. The Ministry of Agriculture needs the soil. The Ministry of Water and Environment needs the soil. The Office of the Prime Minister. Basically, every ministry needs the soil. The Ministry of Transport uses the soil. Therefore, we have to have the better collaborative frameworks, and also frameworks that harmonize and create synergies among these ministries, departments, and agencies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you. And I think that everything that you've said really points to the theme of this panel discussion, that soil really is everyone's business. I want to quickly, if Lokesh can come on for just 1 or 2 minutes and give us sort of a brief highlight as to the ways in which youth in different parts of the world, or where you are dialing in from, what kind of work is going on to contribute to soil health. Thank you.
First of all, I thank you so much for this opportunity. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lokesh. I'm a master's student in organic agriculture and food systems at the University of Arnhem, Germany. So I basically belong from India. So what I think in the youth perspective, it's like, because soil is very crucial, as Dr. Light said, it's life, it's everything, it's mother of all. And we need to take care of it, because in youth perspective, there are like 16% of the global population is youth between 15 to 24. So if youth can act in a proper way, then we can make a good number of changes to protect Mother Earth and soil. And soil is everything, because if we have the healthy soils, then the nutritious food and healthy planet and healthy people, and which leads to everything. But yet this soil is degrading at alarming rate because of the degradation and unsustainable farming practices and all these things. So I believe that youth should play a crucial role along with the policymakers, scientists, along with all the NGOs and whatever it may be. And it's awareness is not only enough, but action is important and crucial. So I think local, act global is the point I want to stress from the youth point of view.
I like that. I think that that would actually be the solution to a lot of the things that we're trying to overcome. So I'll just open up to the panel to give a couple of questions. And please, panelists, you can just unmute yourself and anyone can sort of jump in. So my first question is, what innovative practices can drive soil regeneration and sustainable development?
I'd like to start with some principles, and then maybe panelists after me can go into practices, because I love the questions in the chat that are really asking for specific practices. And I think that when we start thinking about some key principles that can be applied, one, everyone is always asking, how can I put more carbon and organic matter in the soil? And I say, you know what you have to do? The very first thing you have to do is stop soil erosion, stop the soil leaving the plot and being eroded away. So we need to think about keeping the soil in place. The second is we also need to think of soil as the skin of the earth. So just like we cover our skin from the harsh sun and wind, we need to keep the soil covered all year round. We really need to keep the soil covered. Another principle is think about the soil being very deep in some places. It can be very deep. And we need to plant crops and diversity of vegetation to, we say, exploit the entire soil profile. So trees that may have deep roots and grasses that can have wide roots. So really thinking about the diversity of roots, the diversity of the below ground ecosystem. So as we start thinking about soil solutions, let's start thinking about some key principles.
There's a lot of passion going on. Do any of the other panelists want to jump in with innovative practices can drive soil regeneration and sustainable development?
Yeah, thank you very much, man. And this is why I love being on this panel, man. The passion, Leigh, always, and also the storytelling. Two of my favorite things: science, culture, and storytelling, man. So that's I feel right at home. I wanted to thank Leigh. I think Leigh really went right into it. I think the principles are one of the first things that are important. Very, very, very important. And I like how she told it about the skin, etc. I actually use other analogies, but I think I'll take that from now on, Leigh. Yeah, so I think one of the first things we have to think of is exactly what Leigh said. I know that there's a craze, and even in the Caribbean, we have the challenge that persons think the answer is just pumping carbon into the soil, whatever kind of carbon that you get. And the stability of the carbon is an issue there. And because of the rate of how, particularly in the tropical environments, I'm from the Caribbean, you have a higher rate of loss. So the principles are very important. Obviously, even with the principles, there are some what we want to call quote unquote foundational practices, where Leigh would have mentioned it, the use of the diversity of crops, the cover crops, etc. That is always a good thing. The use of stable organic matter, whether it's through compost or other kind of system, will also be a great thing as well. The whole issue of planting different crops, they're trying to avoid as much as possible, or limit, I would say. Monoculture system is a next way that is very helpful there. All in summary, another way is really to look at this nature positive or the soil microbiome positive thing. The soil, we cannot re-emphasize that the soil microbiome, the microorganisms in the soil, just as is important in your gut microbiology, which we have not been talking about a lot, but just as it's important in your stomach microbiology to be able to process the food, to keep you healthy, it is also equally as important, or even more important, I will argue, in the soil. And again, I would say, have some fun with it, man. I think that one of the things, the science is there, but it's important, individual, to have fun. I find soils just so fun to work with, just because of the diversity and the all 360-degree value, the poetry of soil, etc. So have fun with it while you save the world and also us. Thank you.
It's always great to see people who truly love what they do. And I'm feeling all of that energy this afternoon. Yes, Haroon.
Let me dive in and really thank Leigh and Chaney for that kind of opening statements that are very powerful, and also for our microbial, what I'll say, the biology of the soil. Now, I think all my colleagues here, especially the youth who have been defined as a youth, I believe I'm not in that bracket. And if you look at a curriculum in the universities, we all learn about three things: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium as the basis for our soils. Most of our lecturers never taught us about the biology of the soil. And you are saying that biology is the basis for soil resilience. It rebounds back after the harvest. How can it come back and also host a crop for the next year, a crop for the next season? Do you ever ask ourselves? And the message that is always being taught is keep adding fertilizer, do NPK, 46 error, all those kind of, and you can guys, you know very well. So I think the greatest challenge we need to look at is how can we enhance the resilience of the soil that is being killed by phosphorus and nitrogen being added every year. It becomes acidic, we are told to lime it, but no one asks ourselves, when are we going to continue doing these practices that are draining to our pockets, that are killing our soils? That is the core message I think my colleagues are putting here. And we need to embrace it as the youth that is coming on board. Our youth, the future farmers. We know the population that we are talking about, over 70% of our population in this Kenya is the youth. You guys, the future is on the soil. The future is on you, the Gen Zs, and you are the guys we need to help us to rejuvenate our soils. How do we do it? What we are saying is that, and I like what Leigh talked about, what my colleague has talked about, issues of companion planting, enhancing that kind of layer of mushy, spongy soils that we see in our forests. How can we mimic this in our land? Now, the message you have always been told, and this is to our farmers, especially where I come from in Kenya. I come from the mountain region of Kenya. I don't want to politicize that, but this region, we keep on doing our farming, we keep on plowing our land and putting fertilizers every year. So what we are trying to say is that, how can we make this soil so healthy? One is that we need to reduce our levels of soil disturbance. Let's not think that we have to plow land year in, year out, because when we plow, we are releasing carbon from the soil, we are exposing those the microorganisms that in. So we have got bacteria, we have got protozoans, we have got fungi, name it. We expose them to the environment, to the sun, and to the effect of the environment, and these ones are being killed. So we are eroding the biodiversity, what Leigh called biodiversity of our soil. So we need to reduce that. Secondly, let's reduce the dependency of synthetic fertilizers and enhance the organics. As we do that, remember what we say, what we have been told, remember always in your mind, also that kind of enhancing the above ground biodiversity in our soils. Then reduce the dependency of pesticides because they kill that biology in the soil. These are living organisms. Please, let's remember our soils are living, it's a living texture that we are talking about. Let's maintain it without a lot of synthetic pesticides that kill that biology. Thank you.
I feel like whenever there's something that is so complex to dive into, everybody has such rich insights to share, and there's never enough time. But Grace, I also want to give you an opportunity to tell us about the innovative practices that can drive soil regeneration and sustainable development from your perspective.
And I begin from where Harun was ending. The farmers are going to buy all kinds of pesticides, herbicides that are available to them. What if governments, private sector, start at a higher level? One, by banning the manufacture of illegal pesticides and other related chemicals, banning or ensuring that the importation of such chemicals not come. Because remember, farmers, they will purchase what is available to them, the options available. So one, we must protect them. Now, let me tell you something. About 60% of the unutilized arable land is in Africa. Arable land that is available for farming. Now it's unutilized. So why don't we be innovative? So for example, we call it like land banking or we call it land registry. You know, I want to give you an example. We have, where I work, government officers that own land. Some of them don't know where this land is. Others know, but this is land that is idle. And now, so such land is idle, yet there are other groups of farmers that day in, day out are over-exploiting their land. So why don't we take, get to know which land is available? So that we rest land. Who was saying must rest land? I think it is Harun. Land must be rested. It's one obvious and cheap way of how we can make land regenerative. Rest the land, because the land is there and it is idle. Then the other one is countries went ahead, some countries went ahead and did agroecological zoning to establish the different areas and the different soil patterns, the weather patterns, and so forth. Some of this information with climate change and other changes is quite old, because most of this work was done by colonial governments. What if governments reinvest into redefining new agroecological zones, so that we you know, some crops are heavy feeders, so that we recommend the right crops for the right soil, so that we don't give the burden the soils, because once the crop, once the soil is burdened by the very many demands of a certain crop, then you are overworking the soil. And remember, our farmers don't have access to laboratories which actually test the different soil nutrients and all that. And then I still go back to micronutrients. We, as a global population, 33% of the global population are suffering from micronutrient deficiencies that all affect. That's what we call silent hunger. And this, and to planners, to different people apart from us soil scientists, know that it's because the soils are deficient from these micronutrients that there's such a big burden to the health population. Yeah, so we can find ways of replacing, organic ways of replacing micronutrients into the soil. Over to you.
So now we're going to open up to the audience Q&A. And we've been getting some questions in the chat, and I've seen that Leigh's been interacting with different participants in conversation. But there is one question, and Leigh has put in some of her thoughts, but from Emmanuel Chege, he says, I'd like to hear the panelists' thoughts on this. In Africa, is soil degradation a more urgent concern than climate change, or are the two issues equally pressing? I would love for one of the panelists to jump in. Leigh had commented, or replied rather, my take is that more degraded soils are more vulnerable to climate change. So degradation and climate change are inextricably linked. So does anyone else on the panel want to?
Can I address that?
Yes, please, Grace, jump in.
Climate change is such a big problem for soil formation. It will affect even the living organisms. It will affect formation of organic matter. Organic matter is very important in soil formation. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. There's also another question from a CASH colleague, Hannah Linden. She asks, nowadays, most of the agricultural land is transforming into housing societies. How can this issue be resolved? Who wants to jump into that?
I can start. Actually, sure. One of the saddest things we can do to our deep, healthy agricultural soils is convert it to urban areas, because it will never go back, or it is very unlikely it will go back. And I live around Limuru, Kenya, and we have some of the richest soils in the country here for agriculture and rain almost all year round. And the urban expansion and even building garbage dumps is happening here. So I think for me, I would encourage a campaign to bring this awareness about the importance of kind of safeguarding these agricultural soils. So otherwise, it's very worrying. And I think that we have Grace here who's with government, that it's really important to bring this awareness to government officials in a gentle way and get people motivated. So Hannah, thank you so much. And I think Haroon also mentioned, you know, this whole idea of urban soils and contamination is becoming more serious. Thanks.
I wonder if I could join in here as well. Again, I think it's very important. And what I will say that, again, you mentioned Africa, Kenya. The same is true for the Caribbean and elsewhere too. We have learned basically our lessons quite vividly of what happens when we neglect soil, when we treat it less than the value it is. We have learned that lessons when we don't monitor it, when we shifted to things like that, we have learned our lesson. And I'm saying here very concretely, not as gracefully as Leigh, that we need to realize that we know what happens when you are focused on soil, when you value it, when you action it. We also know what we get from that, and it's more beautiful and it's more unifying than the alternate scenario. So I wanted to say that to just advocate that possible thing, whether it's from a government, from a social, from whatever point of view, definitely advocate to save that resource, that culture, that value, that life that we have. I wanted to, again, just point out on the youth aspect, I have a slightly different aspect with the youth. I think that the youth is responsible for the now and the future, not just the future. We just normally say the future. The now is very important, very instrumental. At the same time, I'll also bow in grace that I'm not at that youth stage anymore. Probably not as close to Leigh, but I'm not there. So.
Now, sustainability is it's quite a broad term, but trying to separate it and come up with some key elements to take away home is that soil degradation actually is taking place, and over 40% of our East African soil are degraded. These are soils that cannot sustainably or for long-term handle a crop within a season because of their degradation levels. And also mentioned that it's our responsibility to package all that we have taught. We have talked of measures that can enhance the ability of our soils to support a crop without much of external input. Synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, practices of farming, you know, in terms of cultivating our soils. We can avoid all that and do it in a very minimal level. So when we embrace all these, we'll be talking about soil sustainability.
So as we wrap up, I'd like to give our panelists about 30 seconds to leave us with a final thought. What is the one message you want everyone to take away from today? 30 seconds or less. I know the pressure's on.
Okay, I'll start. That we all have a responsibility and all can be empowered to do what we can to improve soil health.
Yeah, the first thing for me, I'd like to wish everybody a very soilful day and a soilful life. That's the first thing. Just because of that, I would say that soil is life, but how we culture it or how it cultivates, that's very important. So stay very close to it always. Have it in your consciousness, in your heart, and act on it. Have fun with it. Thank you.
We must sustainably harness the soil to get what we want. And two, we need to protect the soil. The soil needs to be protected in whatever way. And in one way of protecting the soil is by putting in place the right legislation. It should go up to the highest level. We need to have acts of parliament that are translated into regulations that should be respected by all actors, that we have the right legislation to protect the soil, because soil is our life.
Thank you so much, colleagues. And what I would say is that whether you are an urbanite, Whether you're a rural person, you have the responsibility of knowing that it's soil that supports our life. It is soil that feeds us. So wherever you are, don't contaminate your soil. Don't contaminate our soil when we're in the urban areas. Neither in the rural, let's not contaminate by depending a lot on external inputs. Soil has got the ability to regenerate itself based on the biomass that comes to the soil. The waste food that we produce, we can actually compost it and take it back to our soil. So it's our responsibility to nurture our soil wherever we are, whether in the rural areas or in the urban areas. Thank you so much.
Soil, I think it's our very own body, so we need to protect it with very care. And I want to just sum up with the word of Save Soils, Sadhguru. It's like it's mother of all. Let's save the soil. Let's make it happen.
Taking care of soil is everybody's business, because when we do, we are not just taking care of soil, we are taking care of ourselves.
Thank you all, our speakers, the participants, the organizers from Allure of Soil, CASH, and CIFOR-ICRAF. Today's conversation reminds us that soil is not just a resource, it is our future. So let's keep this conversation going. Share your thoughts using the hashtag #WeAreSoil and join the movement to protect our soils and secure a thriving future for the world.